Hi and welcome to the Battle of Homestead Memorial for our dear sister and friend, Millie Beik. I want to welcome all of you. There are some personal friends and relatives of Millie that are here that I would like to introduce real briefly. Millie's son, Carl Cauffman, is here. Carl.
Thank you.
And Carl's husband, Gilbert Zamora, is here. There's Gilbert. Karen McGuire Beik and Mark Gaskell are here from Columbus, Ohio. Karen, they were cousins of Bill Beik, and attended the service we had 2 years ago for Bill here at the pump house. Welcome. And Mary Ann Kish, Mary Ann Kish, Millie's and Bill's neighbor from Upper St. Clair is here. Many of us remember Mary Ann because there was always wonderful food at Millie's house, and Mary Ann helped, I'm sure, with that at the parties that we've had at the house for Millie and Bill. It's difficult today, and this whole week has been so difficult for all of us to see world events unfolding and so many people suffering war and suffering anger. And it's important for us to understand that that's only one side of existence. And there is another side, and that is the beloved community that we can build to build the kind of world that we want to build. So if there is anyone who personifies what it means to be a people's historian, we're going to learn about Millie Beik if we didn't already know today. And we're going to celebrate her life. And one way we're going to do it is with music, and we're so pleased that our member, steel worker, union activist, grievance man, the last grievance man, Mike says, of Battle of Homestead. And we've heard Mike Stout, and he's not only that and a very powerful activist in our community, but he's a singer and songwriter and chronicler of Millie and a wonderful friend of Millie and Bill. Mike, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, John. First off, I'd like to extend my deepest sympathies to Carl and to Gilbert and to the family. And I want you to know that my wife and I had a special relationship with Millie and Bill, and we kind of did some things with them maybe a lot of other people didn't do, and learned a lot about your earlier life that a lot of people, for a while back in 2018, 2019, we were spelling with Rosemary, driving her back and forth to the hospital. So when you took Millie to the hospital, anybody knows that you're just getting tests, you got to sit there for an hour or two waiting on crap. So we learned a whole lot about Millie Beik, taking her to the back and forth to the hospital. And for a long time, I thought Millie was kind of this mild-mannered, very gentle, very kind, very nice, sweet person. Well, I learned there was another side to Millie Beik, and she was a fighter. She had courage, and she lived a life I think most of us don't even realize. When she grew up, which the actual little suburb of Windber she grew up was called Mine Number 40, and she had a brother that was mentally disabled. She had a mother that was pretty much sick her entire life. So Millie, from the time she was a little girl, the whole time she was growing up, she was taking care of her brother, and she was taking care of her mother. And she learned responsibility, discipline, and solidarity long before she probably even knew what the word meant. Then when she came to Pittsburgh, it's kind of like when you meet somebody for the first time, you kind of like somebody that's been in the working class as long as I have, you pretty much, you can sense somebody's class position very early on, and Millie was clearly a working class gal when she was growing up, and no matter what she went through, she still was when she was a historian and a librarian and all the other stuff. And Millie, she liked to party too, and she had some really just incredible, for a number of years, dinner parties that we all went to. And she was the quintessence host, and she always had a dog. And the dog that we all remember the most, for those that never met the dog, was this big old, I believe it was a lab. It was humongous, and called Jake. And I'm pretty sure when she took it for a walk, Jake took her for a walk, because Jake weighed more than she did. But one time, Steph and I and Rosemary and Charlie and Linda, I can't remember all who was there, but we were at one of Millie's dinner parties, and she always puts this big thing out. It was enough food before dinner even started that the average person, would, but she had this humongous big, I think it was brie. It was that kind of cheese that was kind of like soft on the inside but had an outside thing. And it was about this big, and there was maybe this much taken out of it. So Millie said dinner time, so everybody took their plate in to the kitchen. And this only lasted for about 2 or 3, 4 minutes at the most, getting our food on our plate. And we got back to the dining room, Millie goes, "Oh, I better bring some cheese in." And she looked over, and this dog had consumed the entire block of cheese. And so I looked at Millie and I said, "Do you have doggy enemas? Because you're gonna need one, baby." So she had a sense of humor. To put it bluntly, a lot of part of her life when she was growing up, she was really shit on, and she had to fight for every single thing that she had and that she ended up with. And I'll tell you one thing, she loved her kids. She loved Eric, she loved Carl, and she loved Bill. And writing a song for somebody like Millie is pretty damn easy. The only thing is the editing, because she had so much life and she contributed so much to all of us. So this song's for, not just for Millie and not just for Carl and the family, but for all of you. It's called Daughter of Windber.
Was the daughter of Windber, child of the working class. Daddy was a coal miner with a Hungarian past. All through her youth, a caretaker for her ailing brother and mom. No adversity could shake her. She was courageous and strong. Though life was hard, the kids played in the yard, making do with what little they had. She loved to sing, making music would bring a sense of joy that washed away all the sad. After 40 years working below, Irwin shut the mines down. Daddy dug his last ton of coal, moved Millie to Chicago town. She had 2 sons, Eric and Carl. They were the love of her life. With a rocky, uncertain tomorrow, she stood strong against strife. Cracking glass ceilings wherever she'd go, raised the boys mostly on her own. Peoria, DeKalb to Atlanta, she rolled unafraid to face the unknown. Hey, Millie, we're here to celebrate you. Hey, Millie, sing your praises. friend. At foreign films they'd rendezvous. Sparks flew between the two of them. Their marriage made her feel brand new. Retirement brought her to Pittsburgh, homesickness in her eyes. She wrote The Miners of Windber while workers fought to unionize. Historian, librarian, activist for sure. Spirit of community endeared her. Her programs and marker will always endure, so that homestead battle will always be clear. Breaking bread with the Pump House gang, Wednesday morning up at Eaton Park. Found a whole new family of friends. We were her Noah's Ark. Her dinner parties were so much fun. She was a hostess who aimed to please. She loved her dogs, Big Jack was the one. At a party, ate a whole block of cheese. Cooking, golden garden, teaching labor history. So much love to give away. Hills, woods, unions, it was easy to see. She was at home here in Western PA. Hey, Millie, we're here to celebrate. Hey, Millie, sing your praises. Hey, Millie, we're here to elevate you forever. Your star will shine. Hey, Millie, we're here to venerate you. Hey, Millie, down through the ages. Hey, Millie, we're here to say we love you forever. Till time forever. Your star will shine. Hey, Millie, we're here to celebrate you. Hey, Millie, sing your praises. Hey, Millie, we're here to elevate you. Hey, Millie, down through the ages. Hey, Millie, we're here to venerate you. Hey, Millie, sing your praises. Hey, Millie, we're here to say we love you forever. Through time forever, your star will shine. She was the daughter of Windber, my number 40 long past. Had a fire within her, she was working class.
I just wanted to say, the only thing I would never ever do again with Millie is get in the car with her when she's driving. Because she was lead-foot Nellie, I'll tell you right now. But other than that, I love her. Thank you very much.
And Carl, got a special little gift for you. On behalf of the entire Battle of Homestead Foundation, we'd like to present to you a copy of the song that you can hang next to Bill's.
I will do that.
And it'll always be there with you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Very sorry, I forgot to introduce my wonderful piano player, Miss Laura Daniels.
They'll be back. Mike and Laura will be back. Now we're pleased to call up Elizabeth Ricketts. Elizabeth?
Before I even start, I'm going to move something I was going to say toward the end to right now, because as I thought about Millie and I wrote about her, and just she's been in my mind for the last couple of weeks, and I thought, nobody's perfect, so what negative thing can I say about Millie? And the only negative thing I can think of was that that woman was a terrible driver. My husband Erwin and I got in the car with her once, in Windber. She was going to give us a tour of the town. Wow. Well, you know, white knuckle, if you look in the dictionary, you're going to, you know, you'll see our hands there because that was a white knuckle experience. I don't think the woman ever looked at the road. She was turned around the whole time looking at my husband in the back seat, talking to him about the things that were around. And it was like, you know, those hills. I mean, we both thought we were going to die. We thought that was it. No, we really did. It was terrifying. And then as I thought about that, I realized, but now I realize that's not true, Mike, that maybe she wasn't always like that, that maybe it was just in Windber, and it was because she knew it so well, she didn't have to look, you know? But I guess she was a pretty terrible driver. Yeah, it was, it was a leap of faith to get in that car. But I was blessed, as I know all of you were, to have Millie both as a friend and as a colleague. When I thought about how to describe her as an historian, we both are labor historians. We both write about coal mining, and we both write about coal miners in the same time period, but we have very different approaches. We're very much alike in many ways, but you know, in other ways we're quite different. And when you're an historian, who you are and the talents you have really shape what you're able to do. And the thing I want to impress upon all of you is that from a historian's viewpoint, Millie accomplished something that no one else has ever done. And I'm not sure anyone else ever will. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Millie was, I think I thought of two adjectives that I wanted to use to describe her. The first was authentic, and the second is engaged. Millie was Millie. There's no one else like Millie. She knew who she was. She, you know, she was kind and gentle, but also the most determined person I may have ever known. Of the things that she went through for her scholarship, the kind of critique that she got, negative critique from people who wanted her to move along. Millie was herself. She was original. She was true. She was authentic. What you saw in Millie was what you got. Millie rejected a lot of the standards of the academy and the historical profession. If you're an academic, you're pressured to publish a lot and often, and to move along with things. And often to go about an inch wide and a millimeter deep. But Millie wasn't like that. Millie was on her own timetable, doing her own thing. She found her own path. She found her own passion, and she pursued that no matter what. She was not a careerist. She didn't care. She was a pure historian. She wanted to tell the truth about past to those of us in the present. And the other thing she was engaged. When Millie started something, she didn't let go. And she was very engaged in her project of telling the truth about coal miners, immigrant coal miners, in the early decades of the 20th century. That's a really hard story to tell. Where on earth are you going to go to find out what that story is? You tell me how you're going to figure that out. I tried interviewing people. The third place I went, I was met with a shotgun. I changed my mind. I said, okay, I'm not gonna be able to do that. Millie could do that because she was Windber. She was born there, she grew up there, her family was from there, people knew her. They knew her as a child, they knew her character, they knew who she was. She could get her foot in the door because of that credential. But she earned a place at the dinner table because of who she was. Because she cared and they knew it. They knew they could trust her. In her book, people's names are changed. You know, the minds may have been closed, but that did not mean that Berwyn White did not have a lot of control in that town. And people were scared, but they trusted Millie. And they gave her access to stories and memories and documents that no one else could have gotten. And Millie had the historical training, and she had the honor. You know, she had that truthfulness in her and that passion in her to tell those stories and to tell them authentically. You know, she wasn't, of course, her you know, sympathies were laid with the working class, but she didn't present anybody as perfect, right? She told the truth. And because she spent time there with people and she visited different families and different ethnic centers and churches and heard all these stories, she was able to do something that other historians don't do. Most of the time when we write history, we pick a field. You know, we pick a time, we pick a place, and we pick one theme. But Millie wrote in the fullness of people's lives. So she didn't just write about the Union, or strikes, or ethnicity, or culture, or gender, or politics, or economics. She wrote about all of that, because all of that is what makes a community. And she could do that. I can't do that. And I really don't know anyone who can, and I guarantee you no one else has. And so what she gave to us was a fullness of understanding, of experience, which, you know, not only spoke to the people in Windber, but to working class people everywhere, to know that their ancestors had, in many ways, the same kind of immigrant experience, which is so antithetical to what people always say about immigrants, right? And what we hear about immigrants today. I just finished last week teaching a unit on immigration, a 7-week unit on immigration in the Honors College at IUP where I teach. And about 4 weeks in, because it's a fast unit, they get, you know, it's double time. They come every day and they get a full semester credit, but they have to work. But a young man came to see me because he wanted to write about his great-grandfather, who was an Italian immigrant to southwestern PA, lived in the coal fields around the turn of the century. And he didn't know much about his great-grandfather because, frankly, he said his family had been embarrassed that his grandfather worked in the coal mines and at the coke ovens. And so he didn't know much. But through this unit, you know, that we studied, he came to feel like he wanted to know more, and he wanted to be able to feel proud of his grandfather and, you know, re-own, if you will, you know, take possession of that heritage. So I gave him some things to look at, And one of the things I told him to go and look at was the Dillingham Commission report in 1911, which was about immigrants in the United States, and countered really most of the same kind of, ethnic descriptions of lazy, drunkards, all of the things that some people always say about immigrants. So he came back to see me a couple of weeks later with this bibliography, and I was really, kind of taken aback to see the Miners of Windber on that bibliography. So I asked him, I said, Nick, I see you've got this book, The Miners of Windber. What did you find in there? He said, well, I know you told us not to get bogged down in books. I know you told us we don't have time to read whole books, and we should look at article literature. But I found the Dillingham Commission, I found the reference in this book. So I went and I took it off the shelf, and I was just going to read about the Dillingham Commission. That's all I was going to do. And then I sat down, and the next thing I knew, I looked outside and it was dark. And so I checked it out. He said kind of sheepishly and sort of defensively, he said to me, Dr. Ricketts, you really should read this one. So I got up from my desk and I pulled my copy off of one of my bookshelves, and I handed it to him and opened the cover so he could read the inscription that Millie had written to me. And he looked at that for a minute and he said, can I take a picture of that? And so, right, Millie speaks. What she has said is going to last because it resonates even with a kid who's pre-med. He's not an historian. He doesn't want to be an historian. He wants to be a medical doctor. But he also, he picked this book up, and it's so authentic, it's so readable, that a kid who could care less really about reading a historical monograph, And so I think that's a wonderful tribute to Millie. I know that would make her smile. And, I hope that all of you can really appreciate what a truly gifted historian she was. And although she really rejected a lot of the conventions of the Academy, and so sometimes the Academy rejected her, she has produced a work that I think is not only going to stand the test of time, but is going to stand alone as a seminal work. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm sorry, I somehow missed the introduction for who you are, but you told us all who you are very well. Thank you very much. I want to call on some good friends, Nick Molnar and Melanie Archangelo. They come to us from out towards Cambria County, maybe not quite that far. I never know exactly where the hometown is, but they're both important labor leaders. Nick was the UMWA district head of in West Central Pennsylvania, the district, and Melanie was an organizer for SEIU before she became a state mediator. And,
I'm going to speak first.
Okay, and Melanie's going to speak first. Hold it right up there, Melanie.
I don't even need this. I really don't need this. I just learned that I was up here today. This is crazy. Because of what he just said, I was a labor mediator. I worked sometimes with my husband through the PLHS, but I had to be like on the sideline because because people would think I was always just for the union, even though I was. So Millie and I were really just friends. And I remember she sent me a cactus. I called her, I said, what? I'm not a flower person. I said, I don't even know what this is. She says, it's a cactus. I said, doesn't that just have points on it? She says, no, it's going to be flowers on it at Christmas time. I said, oh, okay. And the one thing that I really know about Millie is that someone's told us, never get in a car with Millie. And we never did, because every time she wanted to go somewhere, we would take her. Although he loves to be a really fast driver.
But he's a good fast driver.
Well, so far. He's only wrecked a couple times. But Millie and I were just friends. But I couldn't really be together because I didn't retire until 3 years ago. And so I couldn't really be out there with unions. But I really loved being with her. We would go out to eat together and all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't do the kind of things that I would really like to have done with her. The only thing that I remember is helping push the wheelchair. With her husband's name, I'm sorry. Bill, that's right. That's the only thing that I really did for her. Because he would be kind of walking with her, and I would push it, and that's about what it was. And I'm sure that Nick has a lot more to say about Windber and her.
Thank you, Melanie.
You all met my boss. Everybody has really nice things to say about Millie, but I want to explain to you about the challenges that she faced when she was writing her book about Windber. Windber is a unique town. If you look at downtown Windber, it is divided. The center of the town itself was the corporate headquarters of Berwyn White Coal Company. There are 20-some mines around Windber. Each one was an individual community, but they were directly responsible to Berwyn White Coal Company, who in each one of those small mines had maybe 200 or 300 men working in each one of the mines, and there was 20 of them. So when you look at Windber, you look at the downtown business district, and you look at all these mines scattered within about a 15-mile radius around Windber. And that's what Berwyn White controlled. The control that Berwyn White had over the community lasts until today. They controlled the water, they controlled the power, they controlled every aspect of life in Windber, from cradle to grave. And when I heard from some of the coal miners in Windber that there was this woman who came to Windber and was going to write a book about the miners of Windber, I just kind of shook my head and said, well, you know, these guys and gals that work down there are really closed-mouthed. They really don't like to talk about their jobs, their community. They're afraid. I mean, that's the bottom line. They were afraid to speak up. When they found out that Millie was from Windber, that whole complexion changed. They felt secure enough to talk to her and tell her about their families and that. And it was really it was really great for me because, like Ed Costrin, when I met Ed Costrin, he was probably in his late 60s, worked in the coal mines all of his life. He knew some of my family that lived in Windber. But he never really, when he'd come into the office, we'd talk about the mines and what was going on in the mines and what was going on with the problems that they were having. And John Haer another old miner who was the president of the local down there. These were great guys that really worked hard, but you could always sense that thing about this, they really didn't want to talk about Burr and White, because they knew that if they understood if they started talking about the company, that word would get back to the company. So they had a lot of trust in Millie, and trust in time, I guess. But when Willie, I think it was Charlie might have called me one afternoon and said, they were planning on putting a marker up in Windber to commemorate the 1923 strike. And I kind of sat back and chuckled because this is a company time. This is going to be an interesting little project. The first fight that started down there, the first discussion, was over the wording on the marker. Because there was a mention of slave labor, the miners were treated worse than the slaves in the South, or something to that effect. And of course, the powers that be, people who still control Windber didn't like that language. So there was concessions made on both sides, and they finally said they were going to put the marker, but then the fight started about where the marker was going to be. And there's this little park in the middle of Windber, and some of you folks have been through that all the time. A little park right in the middle of the town. It's called the Miners Memorial Park. And I said, that's where it should be. And they said, oh, no. We want to put it out in this community over here, Mine 40. We're going to put it out there. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. So, you know, when you go into one of these kind of arguments or discussions, the first thing you need to know is the character of the people you're dealing against. And I called the borough office and asked when they were having the next borough council meeting. And the secretary was glad to tell me all about it. I believe it was on a Thursday evening, about 6 o'clock, something like that. So I go to the meeting, I walk in and sit down in the back. And I'm listening to the discussion about various aspects of life from Windber, from the borough council president and the delegates on the borough council. And a woman by the name of Van Roy gets up and she mentions this marker and they said, well, we're going to table that for a future date, And she goes, well, we should talk about it now. And the chair of the board, the mayor, said, no, we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to move this meeting along, and kind of blew her off. So I leave the meeting, come home after, very few people knew who I was. Actually, I think the only person who might have known who I was Ann Roy, because I sat there in the back of the crowd. I hurried up and scooted out when the crowd left. Monday morning, I'm sitting in my office. The phone rings. Secretary says, Nick, there's Mayor of Windber would like to talk to you. And I'm sitting back thinking, now this is going to be an interesting conversation. Mayor gets on the phone, or I get on the phone with the mayor, and he starts telling me about how nasty this meeting was, and how this woman tried to disrupt it. This friend of this Millie Beik who's writing this book, and this is outrageous. She disrupted the whole meeting and going on and on. For 3, 4, 5 minutes, he was telling me about how bad this meeting was. And I just sat there and listened to him. And finally, he kind of paused me, and I said, by the way, I need to let you know something. I was at that meeting. There was this silence from the end of the phone. I'm not talking like a 30-second silence. I kind of thought maybe at one point he hung up. And I sat there and waited, and finally he says, why didn't you tell me? I said, why would I tell you? I said, I came to the meeting to see what was going on. I understand perfectly what's going on here. And I said, I believe you're a liar. And I said, I really don't want to be bothered anymore. I said, I really have better things to do than to deal with a liar. This is the Mayor of Windber. Yeah. Hung up the phone. It wasn't 2 days later, maybe 4 days later. Get a call. Oh, we're going to put this marker up right in the Miners Park in Windber, Pennsylvania. That's the kind of people that Millie Beik is. She kind of like guides things along, points out problems, and comes to guys like me and grab the problem right by the throat and hold it up in the air for everybody to see. And this is what's wrong with society. People need to stand up, grab the no-good SOBs by the throat and say, this is where the problem is. Millie Beik was that kind of a person. She's sweet. She was just so hardworking, so loving, so caring for her husband. I told Charlie, the one thing that burns in my mind about Millie was we were here in Homestead at the library one day. I think it was a commemoration for Charlie's book or something. I can't remember what the issue was. Bill came in and Millie. Bill was in a wheelchair, and Millie, my wife Melanie mentioned it. And I don't know how they got into the building, but when I walked outside, I looked around and I was waiting for Millie and Bill to come out, and she was pushing a wheelchair, and I missed her. In the crowd, somehow I missed her. And I turned around and looked, and there she was, pushing the wheelchair up the hill, trying to push with all of her might going. And I ran. I got behind her and helped push his wheelchair up the chair, up this hillside. And it made me think of the women of Windber and what their upbringing and their love and their compassion and hard work and her pushing that wheelchair with her husband in it up that hill and knowing that battles that she went through in Windber trying to get the stories of people of their lives so somebody would document it. And that's what I remember about Millie. Just a kind-hearted, good person who pointed out trouble for guys like me to grab a hold by the throat and say, this is a problem we have to deal with today. And we still do this. She started her book in 2020 or 1923. This is 2023. Tell me what the difference is 100 years later. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Nick referred to Charlie and Charlie's book. I'm pleased to introduce our President Emeritus and one of the founders of the Battle of Homestead, and the person we always go to ask, what does it all mean? And that's Charlie McCollester here.
The light's real bad, so I may not be able to see this, but it was really symbolic that we gather here in the pump house, the site of the 1892 battle between workers and the hired guns of the Carnegie Corporation to honor Millie. Over the years, and especially in numerous phone calls during her recent period of declining health and several visits in the last weeks of her life, she fervently embraced the Battle of Homestead as family and Pittsburgh as home. It's important at this moment of commemoration and celebration of a committed life, a sister in struggle, to remember who she was and what brought her here to us. I first heard of Millie through Erwin Marcus, IUP historian of central Pennsylvania coal fields in the late 1990s when he told me about her. He introduced me to The Miners of Windber, the book, Millie's meticulously researched and scholarly love home to the bitter struggle of Hungarian and Slavic mine workers for respect and for the right to organize collectively in that tightly controlled Berwyn White Coal Company town of Windber, Pennsylvania. Millie and I began by talking about a commemoration of the dramatic strike for union, 1922-23, led by John Brophy, where the union miners, when they were ordered back to work by John L. Lewis, refused to abandon the non-union miners that John Brophy had called out and stood with them for months and months and gave $1 a month each miner to help support those non-union miners for another 6 months of struggle. We worked together on the application to the Pittsburgh Historical and Museum Commission with the goal of obtaining a state marker in time for the 80th anniversary in 2003. Millie firmly wanted the marker to be erected in Memorial Park, and thanks to Nick, this green public space that existed as a token both of Berwyn's generosity to the community as well as his domination of that same community. Her book had already triggered controversy and fierce resistance by the powers that be in Windber. Book sales at the library were blocked. More than a century after the opening of the Berwyn mines, the company remained a powerful force in the community, its most extensive landlord with significant political clout. Millie organized a committee, primarily of women, because most of the men were dead, from Mine 40 and other local mines in District 2 United Mine Workers, who as children had experienced the strike and its aftermath, to discuss the marker project. Millie asked me, she would discuss with it after the different meetings and asked me to attend the final meeting because she was uncomfortable with the marker wording as it had been adopted. The committee had voted to include a reference from the New York City Investigating Committee that had come to Windber during the strike because Berwyn's mines supplied most of the power for the city's subway system. The commission, among many accurate descriptions of Berwyn's cruel policies, had called the condition of the striking miners worse than slavery. Both Millie and I strongly agreed that the miners' conditions were really desperate and had been terrible. But Berwyn White could not sell the miners' children. In negotiations with the mayor, Millie and I agreed to drop the comparison to chattel slavery, and the mayor agreed to drop his opposition to the marker or its placement. Nick Molnar and his raucous band of 30, at least, elderly miners pushing walkers and pulling oxygen tanks confronted the council with moral muscle and some physical muscle too. Windber's council vote on the marker switched from 1 for and 8 against to 9 to 0 in that meeting. In 2008, Millie and her husband Bill moved to Sycamore Street in Mount Washington, and the following year to Upper St. Clair, where they made a beautiful, warm, and welcoming home. Bill was a distinguished professor of French history at Emory University and an engaged member of the Battle of Homestead Foundation, creating our program brochures for several years. Many were privileged by invitations to their parties at the holidays. She very much believed in the beloved community. She'd seen it in the undercurrent of the mining community, the growth of a common cause, a common will that pulled people together, didn't separate them. She found and fed such a community spirit among us who breakfast together on Wednesday mornings. Rosemary will say much more about her warmth and generous spirit, and also will read some from my wife's comments, who spent many long hours on the phone with Millie. But I need to pay homage to her work for the Battle of Homestead Foundation. Millie served for many years as program chair, a position that Suzanne Donsky now does with the same seriousness, commitment, and competence. Millie proposed programs and organized schedules, mailings, and outreach to the press and media about programs. She wrote the interpretive signage in front of the pump house that's right out there with the flowers in front of it. And by reaching out to the Campbell Family Foundation, she funded it. Let me conclude with 2 short paragraphs from Millie's epilogue that speaks to both resistance and to commitment. The first, as has been well explained here, the legacies of an undemocratic, autocratic town live on. The name of Berwyn can still strike fear in the hearts of some elderly miners and their families. that poor, elderly, vulnerable people in the late 1980s vividly remembered the not-so-good old days and firmly believed that the coal company would have their black lung benefits taken away if it were known that they told their own life stories or criticized the company in any way, is an ongoing indictment of the present-day power of the Berwyn system, and might add, the capitalist system. And second, and this is what's most important, the central question for Millie was not about fear. The final question her book poses is the one that welds Millie's viewpoint to the Battle of Homestead Foundation's vision. Whose history will be commemorated? Whose version of history will prevail? The questions themselves remind us that there are no permanent or absolute victories in this world, while the answers to these questions tell us a great deal about ourselves and our current society. Thank you, Millie Beik.
Dr. Joe White is another founding member of Battle of Homestead, former professor at the University of Pittsburgh, specializing in British labor, I believe. And Joe, come on up here.
Thank everybody for attending this most moving session. Okay. I can think of many reasons why we are here today and why Millie deserves our being here today. But I'm going to concentrate on three. The first reason for us to remember Millie, if indeed we can never forget this, is her boundless hospitality, warmth, camaraderie, and the best Hungarian dishes I have ever tasted in my life. Okay. Unforgettable debts that we can never repay. Two, we remember Millie for the miners of Windber. Most of the books on labor history written in the past 50 or 60 years have been monographs, tightly bounded in terms of time, space, and subject matter. The miners of Windber, in sharp contrast, as Professor Ricketts has reminded us so well and so recently, by contrast, is a wide-angled, panoramic story of an entire community for over more than half a century, in which you will find answers to just about all of your questions about how the emerging system of corporate capitalism in the 20th century actually worked, and how the miners of Windber fought back with all of their not inconsiderable ability. Three, Millie was modest to a fault about her accomplishments. Too modest, if you ask me. One of the great Italian thinkers of the 20th century, Antonio Gramsci, one of Gramsci's more original and brilliant insights was the concept of the organic intellectual. Organic intellectuals can help build awareness and consciousness. They seldom come from the same social strata as traditional, old-fashioned intellectuals. Instead, they remain associated with their people. Organic intellectuals are rare. Millie was one of us, and one of them. Thank you.
Now I'm pleased to introduce my old boss, Rosemary Trump, the first women trade unionist elected to the International Executive Board of the Service Employees International Union, and a pioneer, because that was in 1970.
Yes.
Rosemary Trump.
I want to talk about my friend, Millie Beik, who embraced us all, loved all of us, and I want you to know that she loved each and every one of you. Millie could have chosen to live anywhere in the world after her and her husband Bill's retirement, but in fact I am surprised that they did not choose France, since Bill was as fluent in French as he was in English. Speak French to any French person, they would never know that he wasn't from France. And that's as a result of his father's taking him in his childhood to France when his father was doing research for his French history work. His father was a professor at Swarthmore College, and Bill followed in his footsteps. And at the time of Bill's retirement, he was actually working on a book about Louis XIV or 15th's social history during that period of time, and hoping to publish that book in the next few years. But they chose Pittsburgh because they wanted to be a part of the Battle of Homestead Pump House Gang and our beloved community of working class activists. In fact, Millie and Bill chose you. They chose you. They wanted to be a part of your lives, to work with you to promote the preservation of our labor history and honoring those who sacrificed so much to improve the current day economic, social, and political condition that we as working class members have today. And when they arrived here in Pittsburgh, what a tornado of activity. Not only in the day-to-day work of our programming as an organization, as Charlie described earlier, but in our social lives. And I think we've all commented about Millie's love of parties and celebrations. We'd have summer gatherings, Thanksgiving Day meals, we'd have Christmas parties, and birthday parties. And I think birthdays were her favorite. She truly was a life lover. And we talked about, the food that she'd prepare that was boundless, whether sauerkraut and pork, Hungarian goulash, baked salmon, ham, turkey, fresh fruit salad, green beans, almondine, scalloped potatoes, charcuterie, mixed nuts. I mean, the tables teemed with her cooking and bounty. And a special treat would be when she would make her delicious poppy seed rolls. What a cook, extraordinary. Yes, Millie loved her BHF friends and her husband Bill, but I will, and I'm honored here to share with you that the center of her life was her son Carl. And Carl Cauffman, and the other center of her life was her son-in-law, Gilbert Gasparo, and I would venture to say that since Bill's passing several years ago, Millie's happiest 2 years was when Carl and Gilbert left their home in Chicago to live with Millie during the pandemic at her home in Upper St. Clair. Millie would often tell me, with a twinkle in her eye, the fun that they had playing board games, putting puzzles together, playing cards, and at the end of the pandemic, going off to the North Shore Casino to risk a few entertainment dollars. I also want to share how caring they both were, both Carl and Gilbert, during the last few months of Millie's life, making numerous car trips, plane trips back and forth from Chicago, their home, to Pittsburgh to oversee her care in various hospitals and nursing homes. And such a blessing that they were both able to be there with Millie in her last days on earth. Carl and Gilbert, you were loving sons and caretakers of Millie's, and bless you and thank you. Millie was, for me, and I'm happy to share a sisterhood with you as well. And I appreciate each and every day of that. And also I have a very comradeship with Charlie McCollester's wife, Linda, and I feel a sisterhood to her as well. And Linda could not be with us today, but she asked me to read her remarks into the record so that, and she did such a beautiful job of capturing Millie Beik's heart and her endearing spirit. So the following is Linda's letter in her love and memory of Millie. This is Linda's report and remarks. I would like to say a few words about my friend Millie. She was such an amazing person. You have heard already what a scholar and supporter of the working class worker she was. I would like to talk about another side of Millie's life, and that was her family. Every time we met, we would talk about our families. She was so grateful that she had met Bill, and their life together was filled with history, love of music, movies, and even primetime TV. They really enjoyed watching The Voice each week. Throughout Bill's fight against his Parkinson's disease, Millie was there. Millie was also a proud mother of her son. Carl, she would like to brag about him. She would talk about the wonderful art he would create, his various jobs, and then his husband, Gilbert. She told me many times that the day they got married was the happiest day of her life. She so enjoyed her visit with Gilbert, cooking and talking with Carl about Hungary. Another highlight of this part of her life was when she and Carl were taking Hungarian language lessons together. She would tell me, now don't call me on such and such a day because I've got to have my lesson in Hungary with my son Carl. And her boys were her pride, and I think that was so beautiful. It was really sad to me how her last months were. I truly believe she was just tired of fighting when she passed. The image that I really hold on to is the dinner that Charlie and myself and Rosemary had with Millie at the fish market restaurant at the Galleria for her 80th birthday. She was wearing a light blue outfit with a blue headband, and with her blue eyes, they were sparkling. We were all laughing and hugging each other, and this was just a wonderful, wonderful example of her happiness that she shared. Millie was such a beautiful, caring woman who made you feel that you were the most important person when she was with you at the time. I miss my friend every day, but know her and Bill are reunited in their love. And I would like to finish by saying to all of you that once again, Millie Beik embraced, loved, and hugged us all. Thank you.
I've always been interested in history, and I just was always, history always interested me because I grew up around all these immigrants and all these coal miners. My dad was a coal miner at 11 years of age, and going anywhere, I was just a dumb girl who was supposed to get married. That's the way my father thought. In Windber, in mine 40, that's what growing up was the way it was. So we had this big shelling of all the deposit from the coal. They used to call it the biggest coal mine state, and it was pretty big. And we kids used to play in the grubby little pictures of water that had all this poison in it. I was most interested in places like Windber with the immigrants and all of that. I did it as a dissertation, first of all, in 2 volumes. It was so big, because half of it was devoted to studying what the community was like. The second was what the miners did to get a union.
Miners of Windber, I think most people here know of it, a very important book. We really want to honor Millie very much for what she did. And her health is very poor. She's really struggling, but she is here in spirit, and we're so happy that we have it being filmed so that she can see it. And I know she loved this town. Mine 40 was where her heart has always been. And she came back to this town from the South, and she wrote this book. It's an act of love. It's the story of the miners of Windber. It can be got through Penn State Press.
On a long and winding road from Homestead, PA to France, Millie and the working class were his romance. Was a best friend of mine, and he was a best friend of mine. Good food and wine were essential, though his body was in pain. Their house was party central for their friends in the pump house gang. I loved to make him laugh, pull his joke and make him smile. He'd take my gaffes and jokes with
bonded us real tight. He loved all kinds of music, French classical to rock. The pictures he would use it to make it
want, above all else, to abolish poverty in their lives and in the lives of the white poor. That is the heart of the program. This great leader of the civil rights movement was killed there in Memphis in pursuit, remember, of the strikers' cause and social justice on April 4th, 1968. Thank you.
So now I want to introduce Millie Beik. I formed the committee for the two events that we're having this week, looking at the separation of children at the borders and U.S. policy for immigration. And we've been so pleased to have Millie with us for the last 7-8 years now here in Pittsburgh, working with us in the Battle of Homestead. So this is Millie Beik, and she's going to tell us about our guests in our program. Thank you.
Thank you. The broad theme of the program for this year for the Battle of Homestead is building bridges. Bridges from the past from 100 years ago, 1919. And those of you who came to the program that we had on that are very well aware that immigrants were one of the targets of that time. Fear abounded in 1919 in the US, and hope abounded for others in the United States. What we hope to do today in this program is to build a bridge to the Latino community, and we want to welcome all those who are interested in immigration and in the subject of what's happening to not only the children, but the parents and other family members of the immigrants, of all those people who are seeking asylum in the United States. We want to welcome you to our group and hope you will join us and think about it and see what we can do. And we hope today that our speakers will tell us how we can help them.
He's a native of Windber, right outside.
Mine 40.
Johnston.
Mine 40.
And her father was a coal miner, and Millie somehow fought her way to go to the university and eventually became a doctorate in history. And in the process, she wrote a book about the miners of Windber. And she was, for a time, a teacher of history at Northern Illinois University, also Emory for a while, right? And we've been so pleased to have Millie with us for the last 7-8 years now here in Pittsburgh, working with us in the Battle of Homestead. So now we come to the time where whoever would like to speak may, if you wish. So, Daddy.
I have some words from Millie. The first time that she came for breakfast at the Eaton Park, we parked at the same time outside, and I recognized it was a stranger and welcomed her, and she said, the Pump House Gang is the reason that we moved to Pittsburgh. And I've always remembered that. Thank you.
I'm Karen, and like many of you, when I first came to the Pump House and knew me only as Betty's friend, Millie embraced me when she heard that I was beginning to write a novel about West Virginia miners, and she surprised me by gifting me her book. The next time I saw her, I had the book in my hand. It was dog-eared, there were Post-its, and she said, "You read it?" Dr. Ricketts, yes, I read it. And we had a wonderful conversation, and the next thing I knew, she had orchestrated for the two of us to drive. Yes, I drove with Millie to Windber, and we met up with Nick and got into Nick's car, and Nick drove. And the two of them brought to life what Millie wrote in her book, and it was amazing. But what really touched me was we were in the basement of the church after having dinner, after having seen the Vanka murals. And Millie started sharing her own personal experiences as a little girl in Windber. And she told me about one evening walking with her father holding his hand, and she said she always thought of him as the strongest man in the world. But they walked past the superintendent's house, and she saw a change, and she was only a little girl, but she saw a change in his manner and his face and his body language, and she could feel it in her hands that she was holding on to him. And then she reached across and we held hands, and I felt it. And it was the most beautiful gift that she could give a novelist. And I thank Millie for that, and all of you.
I hope I'm going to be able to do this. I tried at home and I was crying at home, so we'll see. Bob and I spent 2 very special days with Millie. One was so joyful and one was so full of sorrow. When Bill had, for some reason, to go to Asbury to be in some nursing care, he was missing Jake and Jake was missing him, but Jake was too old to get in the car on his own. And so we went over to their house and Bob lifted Jake into the back of the car and we took him to the nursing home so he and Bill could spend some time together, and also many people in the nursing home was happy to see Jake prance down the hall. The other day was the day before Bill died, and we went to the hospice and spent the day with Millie just to sit with her because at that point Bill was unconscious, and we again talked and talked and talked. And there was a third time. The last time we saw Millie at the nursing home, she put my hand on her heart and said, "Who would have thought that we would find a family when we came here?" Now, Millie never, ever stopped thanking us for the first 2 things. Every time we see her, "Oh, you remember you helped us get Jake to the hospital, and you sat with us." Millie has taught me that we need to say thank you. We need to remember that everybody needs to hear that, and she was so generous with that. Everything that she would ever have had somebody do for her, she lets you know that she appreciated that. And that's a gift, and I'm going to try to live by her example.
My name is Bill Koshute, a minor descendant from Windber. This is very emotional. Both my grandfathers were coal miners, one from Italy and one from the company, the Roosevelt Mountains. And we didn't know anything. We knew absolutely nothing. Windber graduates my age knew nothing about our mining history. It was so suppressed. Nothing about the strikes, nothing about the massacre of 1906, nothing. And when it ever was brought up in a tangential manner, it was always miners rioted and it had to be put down. But that narrative was in the history textbooks for decades until Millie traced down every aspect of what happened April 16, 1906, when shots rang out in the April sky of Windber. An indiscriminate shooting cut down 3 miners and an 11-year-old boy, Curtis Kessler. Millie sketched that out for us with her indefatigable research, tracing down Reverend Michael Balog's letter that described exactly in multiple languages that it was a peaceful strike. I mean, Millie outlined in her book the fact that the miners had economic slavery. I mean, they were never paid for their work. The fact that anything could have been called dead work and there was no pay for that day. We didn't know any of this. You know, we had no inkling of what it took to put food on the table. And as others have said, they never spoke it. It was kept silent because there were repercussions. We're forever grateful as miner descendants that really put this book together. And she, as Nick pointed out, Anne Roy, I spoke to her this week. She's 93. She's one of the closest heartfelt friends of Millie, and she gives her sympathies to Carl and Gilbert and all of her friends. I'm trying to reach her by phone. It's a little bit difficult, but she is basically the Mother Jones of Windber, fought for everything, and the marker was really something that we're so proud of. And the location, Nick was absolutely right. I mean, they would have put it somewhere where nobody would have driven past it to see it. She stayed a friend since we made our friendships in 2005, and we were starting to commemorate the centennial of the 1906 massacre. And she was able to live through technology and emails and about the way Facebook worked, that we were doing research into the descendants of the victims of 1906. And one reached out to us finally, Ellen Perry, and she found Millie a lot, and that was a miracle that she was able to find a minor descendant of one of the victims. That's what we're doing, and she inspired us. Her research inspired us, and she loved everybody in Windber. I just can't describe how grateful we are to have this book in our history. And we were so blessed to have her in our life. I mean, I'm sure all of you felt that way. And she'll always be in our hearts forever. And it was such a blessing. And she gave and gave and gave, heart of gold. She just gave to everybody. And so I was glad to become what you brought. Oh, okay. I made Hungarian goulash. I hope it's okay. Just in honor of Millie's ethnicity and also some of her some nut roll, poppy seed roll, and let's celebrate. We're celebrating Millie because that's what she wanted us to do. She was awesome, and her work will live on. We're trying to get our history taught. I mean, there were 1,600 owned towns. They're called company towns. And I'm sure Windber's suppression of history is endemic throughout the whole state. It's, like I said, we were never taught any of our history we weren't allowed to be taught about because the company was too powerful. I mean, Windber miners put the B in billions, the B in Berwyn, and the B in Blackwood. And Millie basically touched on all of that in her book. We were the last generation, one of the last generations to see the suffering of what Black Nun took on our grandfathers, and large flatbed trucks with the oxygen tanks on them going up and down the streets before they had oxygen generators. And we can see that all the time. Windber's doing well, but we can't forget our history, ever. And the marker is so important, and all the research. And this book is my life. This book is my descendants, and I'm forever grateful for it. And I'm so glad she had all of you in her life as well, and especially Carl Gilbert and Bill.
Dear Millie, this is for Millie, a small dedication to how I feel about her, the admiration and honor I would give her. Millie on one side and me on the other. The highest hill in downtown Windber, where the Berwyn elite ruled. Millie is mine 40 and me in mine 36, both on opposite sides of the hill. I read an article in the local paper about her book and a visit to her relatives who coincidentally were friends with my parents. Both families came from the same background in Europe. I called for a book and both Bill and Millie came to my home, and there was an instant connection. Millie did everything to encourage me as I fought strip mining and coal truck traffic on the street. I was so grateful for her support and encouragement. Millie became my mentor and true friend. We had the insight to see the brutal truth of the situation in our town as we lived it with Berwyn and Windber. Millie's book and efforts told the true story of the hunky for the world. God bless her. She will never be forgotten. Anne Roy.
We have a guy that comes to breakfast every time. He says very little, but he's going to sing a song for us, and we're going to find out a little bit more about what he does. This is Scott Speedy.
Back in the early 1990s, everybody hear me? In the early 1990s, I was doing some research at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania library. And I was walking around in the new library, and there was an archive section, and I'd read in the paper about dealing with the coal mines. So as I was walking past, there was a bunch of people in there, and I said, well, I'll stop and see what I can find out. And I went in and told them that I had worked in a coal mine, and my mother was born in a tent in the 1922 coal mining strike. And I said, you know, I wanted to know if anybody knew anything about this, because we knew nothing other than the fact that that's what happened. So then I talked with some people, and then about 2 weeks later, I get this package, or a big envelope, it's about this wide, and I open it up, and it's a photograph of the tent city my mother was born in. Somebody had taken a picture of somebody's garden, and in the background was this tent city. So I thought that was pretty remarkable. And then when I joined the club down here, the first day I was there, Millie came up, and I told her I remember, and she wrote her name and address and phone number and email address and everything on there, and was just very welcoming to me along with everybody else. So anyway, I'd like to dedicate this song to Millie. I didn't write it, but it's a good song. Strong, you load 16 tons. What do you want? Another day over and deeper in St. Peter. Don't call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up shovel and walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons. Number 9 coal on the straw box, he said, well, bless my soul, we load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day over and a deeper in that St. Peter. Don't call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. if that right don't get you, then the left one will. You look 16, what do you get? Another day over the deeper than St. Peter, don't you come up. I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
The Gathering at Bantley Place, which is the cover of Millie's book. Horrific strike of 1922 to 1923. 600 families were evicted, 2,000 people living outside of Windber in tents. And it was basically, we were in our 33rd year of a non-union work in Windber, where you were paid by the weight of your coal, but you were never allowed near the scale. There was no weight checking there. That was one of the huge reasons why they went on strike. And the second one was the dead work, where if you were a miner, say you had 5 children, you were in your seam and you hit rock, and it took you 3 days to hew out the rock, you were not paid for those 3 days. They did not call that work. So we basically had economic slavery. So the strike was horrific. It lasted 16 months, and we commemorated it. I'm so grateful that Nick and Charlie drove Millie to be at Bantley Place on the 100th anniversary of the centennial on Labor Day for the strike of 1922-23. When they pulled up and came into the building, we were so shocked. You know, we were so grateful to have Millie there at that centennial. And so, and also the book was sent to the strikers on the picket line of Starbucks to form the union, and they contacted me. So we have one of the strikers there that is reading their book up in Boston this year. That's how relative and pertinent her book is. It's now, it's today. It's 1906, it's 1922, and it's 2023 today. And so, as Ms. Ricketts pointed out, this book's gonna live in time. You know, it's so relevant to what's happening to workers today. So it outlines a lot of what happened, you know, the struggles of Windber. You know, when you look at this, it's like, you know, it's like your worst day at your job is 10,000 times better than their best day on their job. I mean, you can't say nothing about what you do or how bad your job is. You just, when you're a minor descendant, you can't do that. You just say, this is how Dad, Grandpa put food on the table. And what's great about Millie's book was how she focused on the women and how powerful the women were. That was so true, and how resourceful they were, growing gardens and livestock and things like that. So we, at the time, our goal is to meet and commemorate on Labor Day at Bantley Place every year. And at the centennial, we had the thought of holding them up high and trying to get the descendants of these miners, there's probably 2,000 or 3,000 on the gathered there on the cover of the book, and hold up the photographs of your grandfathers, great-grandfathers, uncles. And so Millie did bring in pictures of her dad, and it was kind of rained out, but we still did it in the building. So, but you'll see the tent cities. I brought some of the pictures of my immigrant families, both sides of them. Millie brought hers, and the whole story. And just to see people think, you know, well, why is there a 10-year-old boy in the mine? You know, were those parents irresponsible? What's going on? No, it's like if you were in a minor house, if you were in a company house and your dad was laid out or killed or something, you were evicted. And the only way to stay in that house was if the oldest boy went into the mine. And that's what happened. And so you see the horrific story, the Breaker Boys, that was all touched on in Millie's book and things like that. So we were forever.
We showed the news story.
Okay, yeah. So we were forever grateful that she was able to be there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, so Bill sent this to us. It's a news clip from the local television station up in his area. And Millie is a part of the report.
Members of a small town in Somerset County are remembering a historical shooting that happened in 1906 and left 4 people dead.
Nicole Pacino spoke with a local historian who calls it Windber's darkest day. Nicole?
Well, Tim, it happened here in Windber near Graham Avenue in the old Windber Fire Hall 115 years ago from today.
And this is part of our Windber history.
It was Easter Monday, exactly 115 years ago at this location when Windber's history was changed forever.
Windber experienced economic slavery. They simply were not paid the wage and the amount of work that they did.
That's how members of Windber's mine worker union felt, and they wanted justice. So they went on a peaceful strike, but their company hired private guards with guns.
For whatever reason, the guards at the time opened fire indiscriminately into the crowd of unarmed miners and citizens.
3 unarmed miners were instantly killed along with a child who was hit by a stray bullet, and over a dozen others were shot and wounded.
The victims of that day were Stefan Popovich, Mathis Toman, Simeon Wojciech, and Curtis Kester.
Over a century later, Windber residents are still remembering the victims with services in the town's Catholic churches.
We try to remember those 4 that lost their lives on Windber's darkest day.
There's even a book about Windber's miner history by Millie Beik of Windber.
They need to know because they're going to have to live in the future and they're going to have to fight some of these same kinds of battles over and over again in order to get their rights.
Now trying to educate the next generation.
Windber miners and miner descendants never forgot. We never forgot their loss, and we would like to invite them to our memorial services, and that's one of our goals.
And many people I spoke with from Windber say they never even heard about this before. But Millie told me that might be because generations are forgetting to pass the story down, and it's a very important story to keep alive. Reporting in Windber, Nicole Pacino, 6 News.
That Carl requested. This was Millie's favorite song in the whole world. But I want to say something, a couple things real quick. Steph and I got to go bowling with Millie and Bill about 3 times, and I don't know if anybody else ever went bowling with, besides maybe Carl and Gilbert, but when we went bowling with them, like 2 things like struck me. One, Bill was already starting to, the Parkinson's was setting in, so Bill was already bent over, and like when Bill would bend over to throw his ball, like it would take him about 15 seconds. And like one time, Millie kind of like whispered in my ear next to me. She said, "He thinks he's reading a book and studying. Just bear with him." And then the last thing I want to say about that is like the 3rd time we went, like I always bowl my normal 125 to 140, and Millie bowls like step 110, Millie 101, whatever. Well, the 3rd time we went, my shoulder was out with severe arthritis, and Millie actually beat all of us and apologized. She apologized for beating us. Who do you know ever apologized for beating somebody at bowling? And the last thing I want to say is when Pauline and I hope everybody gets to hear once she cleans it up a little bit, the hour-and-a-half oral interview that Millie and I did with, Pauline and I did with Millie just before she died. It was about a week or so before she died, but she was like she was in rare form, and like when they brought her food in, she said, "Get that shit out of here." And I mean, she was really, but she told something to me, a bunch of stuff to me and Pauline that I thought was just precious. And the most precious thing she ever told us of all the interview was I was asking her all these questions, and I said, "Tell me when and where you fell in love with Bill Beik." And she said, "Well," she's telling me and Pauline, she said, "You know, still with that other guy, you know, and we weren't together." And I was kind of like she actually used the word rendezvous with Bill, and we used to go to foreign films. He would always drag me to all these foreign films, especially these French films. And she says, one time we were sitting there watching this foreign French film, and she was holding Carl in her arms, and he was, I think she said he was 1 or 2 years old. And she looked over at him, and she fell in love with him. That's when she fell in love with Bill Beik, holding you, Carl. So. This song goes out to you and to Millie. It's her favorite song. That surprised me. That's the Beatles.
When I found myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. When the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. And even when they parted, there is still a chance that they may see. There will be an answer, let it be. Oh, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Night is dark, there is still light that shines on me. Shine till tomorrow, let it be. I'll wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. With the words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be.
Big hand for Millie Beik, everyone. Thank you.
I've said this many times, and if it's not abundantly clear by now, when both my mom and Bill mentioned that they were thinking of retiring here, I was like, well, that's crazy. I mean, they were living in Atlanta, and I thought everybody retired to go to Florida, and that's what they do. And I think I told my mom that. She didn't say much. It didn't take very long for me to realize how wrong I was about that. And it's been said many times here, but she came here because of all of you. This is where she felt at home, and she felt she belonged with all of you, and she wanted, and she loved you. I mean, she did. This was her thing in every way. And she had other things, you know, languages. things like that. She was a lifelong student, and that's one thing that I take from her, because I don't have some of the same experiences with growing up the way she did, obviously. And but to the last, she thought about you, and I can't believe how many people came to visit her in her last months. That's something that I already knew, but I would go visit her once in a while at the hospital or at a nursing home, and I'd find somebody here there, or somebody would be calling the house. And it amazed me. She made the best decision she could have made, and built it too. So I want to thank you, and appreciate everybody coming and bringing things. Please eat, and please, take your time. I don't know how much time we have actually, but there's goulash apparently. So as you know, my mom wanted everybody to have full stomach, and again, I don't know what else to say except thank you for coming, and I appreciate my getting to know some of you a little better. And for people I haven't met, thank you as well.
Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for welcoming Millie. She really did love you, love this organization, loved what you represented. As you heard Mike say at the beginning, she lived through a lot, and that could have made someone really cynical, but instead it just got her deeper into her humanity. She saw the humanity in everyone. That's what drove her. That's what drove her book. That's what drove her passion, her politics, her way of being. And food is love for Millie. So she'd be very disappointed if you leave here hungry. So please eat, enjoy yourself, and thank you. Thank you for sharing this time with us. We really appreciate it.